All right, everybody.
Well, that was a long time ago. There was no social media, so.
Well, thank God. Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back to Oxygen for the Soul. This week's Parsha is Parshat Behar. We're going to pick up from where we left off last week. Last week, the Parsha and more ended with the Torah telling us about this blasphemer, and then segueing into a bunch of laws that have to do between man and man, and our responsibility to ensure that the laws were actually executed. And whereas over here, the particular law we're talking about is the Parsha ends with Moshe taking out this blasphemer out of the camp. They pelt him with stones, and it ends with Kasher Tziva Hashem et Moshe. The Jewish people did exactly what Moses had asked them to do. Pasha begins this week. Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe Bahar Sinai lemor, and God said to Moses on Har Sinai, on the Mount Sinai, saying. Now, I'm just going to read a couple of verses, and I'm going to come back to this. This is a fascinating point over here that I'm going to bring up. Then it says, "Daber b'nei Yisrael v'amarta alehem ki tavo'u el ha'aretz asher ani noten lachem." When you come into the land of Israel, v'savta ha'aretz Shabbat la'Hashem. When you come into the land I'm giving it to you, you shall rest. The land, it should be a Shabbat before God. Sheshet shanim tizra sadecha. 6 years you shall sow your field. V'shesh shanim tizmor kamecha. And 6 years you shall prune your vineyard. V'asavta et tuata. And you shall gather in its crops. Ubashana shvi'it, on the 7th year, Shabbat Shabbaton, the mega complete Shabbat, yeah, la'aretz, it should be for the land, Shabbat la'Hashem, sadcha lo tizra kamacha lo tizmor. Right, the land should rest in the 7th year. Do not sow, and v'kamacha lo tizmor, and don't prune your vineyards. Okay, now we're talking over here about the idea of Shemitah, right? Of the year of a sabbatical for the land of Israel, which is the land of Israel is going through right now, I believe. So let's just unpack this for a little bit. God says to Moses on Mount Sinai, Lamor. What do you mean? Why are we singling out over here the idea that God spoke to Moses on Mount Sinai? We've had a whole entire book, right, where we've spoken about how God commanded, God spoke with Moshe, right? And we never mentioned once this idea of Mount Sinai, except for the fact when God came down to Mount Sinai. The question is, why is it over here, right now, when we are describing, speaking, and talking about Shemitah, does God insert the word Mount Sinai? So there's a whole bunch of answers, and today's class will be dealing with this a little bit. Now, just let's see Rashi for a second. What does Rashi say? How does Rashi answer the question? Rashi's our best friend, and he says, "Ma inyan Shemitah etzel Har Sinai." What is the relationship between Shemitah and the mentioning over here of Har Sinai? That's the question. B'kol mitzvah nemru miSinai. Every single mitzvah, every mitzvah was said at Mount Sinai. We believe as Jews that every single one of the 613 commandments were given to the Jewish people at Mount Sinai. So of course, every mitzvah would express itself at Mount Sinai. So what is the verse coming to add? We don't believe that the Torah uses extra words. It is there to teach you something profound. If something extra is written, it is there to teach you a lesson. And the question is, what is that lesson? Ella, this is how Rashi answers it. He says, Ma Shemitah nemru kiloteya. Just like Shemitah is said with all of its details, misinai, all of the inner workings and the details of the laws of Shemitah come from Sinai. Av kulan nemru kuloteyan. And therefore, even all the other mitzvot, all of the details were also said on Sinai. Okay? That is how Rashi answers the question, and you should be somewhat bothered by that because it doesn't really answer the question. What do you mean? It says over here because all the details were given, and therefore all the details were given. That's true for every single mitzvah. Every single mitzvah works exactly the same way. Okay, now, you have to understand how this works. Okay? You look at a tree and recognize that the tree has all these different branches. It has sub-branches, and then at the ends of those branches, you have little fruits. And then when you look at the fruit and you go to its core, you find some seeds. Now, do the seeds look anything like the tree? Do the seeds look anything like the fruit? As a matter of fact, if you like apples, you know that there's a little bit of cyanide in the apple seeds. right? A little bit of poison. The seeds, the apple itself produces a poison to try to protect it from invaders at the core, to try to ensure that the seed itself is going to survive, because in the seed itself you have all the things necessary to regrow the actual tree. So you take the seed, you plant it, and what happens? All of a sudden, the seed rots, it dies, it eventually breaks out of the earth, and now you have another tree with the branches, the same exact kind of tree as the tree that it came from before. Now, that's very interesting, that you could look at the seed of an apple and get the whole entire tree again. This is the way I like to think of commandments. Were all of the commandments listed at Mount Sinai? One answer is yes. How? If I give you the seed itself, the core principles at Mount Sinai, in that seed, you'll have everything else that came before it. So why are we mentioning Mount Sinai? We're mentioning Mount Sinai because Mount Sinai was a place where we got the core stuff. We got the Seder Dibrot, the 10 Commandments, and we know, according to Rav Hirsch and others, that the 10 Commandments are the 10 main mitzvot categories that were given to humanity. And in each one of the 10 categories has a segue or an offshoot, a branch to the 613 commandments. And everything is found in those 10. Okay? So when we speak about Moshe Behar Sinai, answer number one is because we want you to know that the roots, this is what Rashi is really saying, that the root principles are found at Mount Sinai. Were all the details given there? Yes, but not explicitly, but we were able to derive them from the things that we received at Mount Sinai. Answer number two, what is Har Sinai supposed to teach us? What is Mount Sinai symbolic of? So now, when you think of a mountain, climbing a mountain, right? That's a big, difficult task to do, right? You're climbing, and you have to look at the summit, and you're finally getting to the top, and now you're over the clouds, but you haven't even reached the top. I was in Zurich, and we went onto this mountain, and we took a cable car up. It took 45 minutes to get to the top, and at some point, the cable car breaks through the clouds, and now you're on top of the clouds, and you still don't even see the top of the mountain. And you finally get to the top of the mountain, and all you see is an ocean of clouds. You see nothing else. It's beautiful, right? But there's something haughty about a mountain. Think about how much haughtiness we have after we've climbed the mountain. At the base of the mountain, you're standing at the bottom, you're humbled. I'm so small, I have somewhere to go. I have a student who climbed Kilimanjaro, and he was saying how the hardest part of climbing Kilimanjaro is just the amount of time it takes to get to the top. Like he spent 2.5 days climbing a mountain full time, 8 to 10 hours a day. He said it humbled him. When you get to the top, you're filled with so much joy and excitement. But what's interesting about Mount Sinai is that Mount Sinai was a very small, humble mountain. Mount Sinai was a mountain that was chosen because of its humility. Why is humility the attribute that needs to be associated with the receiving of the Torah itself? What is unique about humility that allows us to express, learn, keep Torah in a way that is meaningful? So, I really believe that out of all the traits, humility is most important, because without it, you're unable to actually ask any questions and learn, because it's so easy to believe you have all the answers. And I find myself dealing with this particular struggle where students say, "Oh, Rabbi, I learned this already. I know it already. You can't teach me anything new. I'm good." And I say, "No. Where's your humility? The only way for us to be able to receive the Torah is if we become like Moses. What was he? An Eved Hashem. He made himself into a servant. Are we servants to knowledge? Are we servants to the study of our faith, of our belief? Are we able to humble ourselves, to create a space within ourselves, to make ourselves smaller, like a small mountain, and say, you know what? I really should spend an extra 5-10 minutes, maybe, minimally, a day in trying to understand these ideas. They're my ideas. How am I inculcating them into my life? How am I absorbing them? How do I understand them? How do I make them relevant to us today?" So the parasha continues, and it tells us about these laws of Shemitah. Now, for me, like the Khatam Sofer explained so eloquently, these laws are not just laws that are agricultural. There's something called crop rotation, where you stop working a particular field, and then you rotate the fields, so that you have the optimal amount of nutrients, optimal amount of ingredients in the soil necessary to raise and grow the best soil. Maybe that's what this is. Maybe this was just a hack that said, okay, if you want to grow good, a good vineyard or a good apple orchard, then all you got to do is leave the land flat for 6 days, for 1 year after 6 years of work. But listen to what it says over here. He says, look this, et safir ketzircha, after he says you leave the 7th year clean, right? It says Shana Shvi'it Shabbat Shabbaton LaHashem. In the 7th year, it's going to be a complete rest. Lo tizra karmecha v'lo tizmor. You shall not sow and do not prune your vineyard. But what do you do? Et safir ketzircha, right? What grew on its own from your previous harvest? Lo tiktzor. Don't harvest it. Ve'et inve nizirecha, right? And the grapes that you've set aside for yourself, lo tivtzor, don't gather in. Shnat Shabbaton yelach aretz. It's a rest for God. Okay. Then it continues. Va'aita Shabbat haaretz lachem la'achla lecha u'lavdecha. You shall have a Shabbat of produce of the land for you to eat. Lacha for you, ulavdecha for your slave, amatecha for your maidservant, ulaschircha, ultoshavcha, hagerimach, and for your hired laborers, and for the resident, and for all you dwell, even for your animals. Lachaya ashabarat tzitiyah kol tualecho, right? It shall be all its crops to be eaten. So you're going to count for yourself 7 cycles of 7, right? And now you're going to have something called the Yovel. Sheva, 7 times 7 is the Jubilee. You're going to blow the shofar. Everyone goes free. And then the Torah promises whoever keeps the Shemitah will have double in the following year. Going to have double crops. Okay? Now, I don't know about you, but to me, this all sounds very, very strange. I'll explain. You see, there's 2 theories for me as to what the Torah actually, where it actually comes from. Possibility number 1 is that it was written by a bunch of old men sitting in a cave somewhere. Possibility number 2 is that it was written by a very knowledgeable entity called God. Okay, so let's go to the first principle. Let's say it was written by a bunch of guys. If you're writing a Torah, a book, a religion, right, where you're trying to get new people to join your faith, you want new people to believe into your ideals and beliefs, would you put this law in your books that you're going to work for 6 years and then you're going to stop, right? And then you're going to get rewarded in the 7th year. And don't worry about it, by the way, because at the 7th year, everyone's got to come. At the 7th year, everyone's got to come up to Jerusalem, right? And your borders will be protected, and your enemies won't come and fight you. Who can make that promise? Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, shehakol nihiyah b'dvaro. Who would make that kind of a promise? Would a bunch of guys put that into the Torah itself, knowing that all you have to do is have one attack, one war, or 1 year where the land itself would not double its produce for the whole entire religion and faith to completely fall apart? Didn't take very long. Why did Judaism survive? Who would make such a promise? Would you make such a promise? I would make such a promise, that's for sure. The Torah, my friends, could only have been written by a divine, infinite being whose words matter. I would never assume that the Torah itself was written by a man for this reason alone. It makes statements that could only be ensured by someone that has control over nature. Like the first pasuk in Bereshit says, right, that God created the world. The reason why we read about Bereshit is to tell you that God is the owner of the land. Now, he gives us the land. The land is very much dependent on Har Sinai. This is the third answer. What does that mean? This means that if we don't keep the Torah in the land of Israel, the land itself will reject us. That there's a contract here that so much of who we are, so much of what we do is very much dependent on our ability to maintain a deep relationship with the mitzvot in the Torah itself. There's a contract here. Mount Sinai was meant to humble us. You know where we lack our humility the most? When we're making lots of money. You're making lots of money, right? You are so distracted, and it's so easy to believe that you're so powerful because of all the things that you have, when in reality, even those things are a gift from God, right? We don't have today maaser in the same way that we did back then. We don't have shemitah in the same way. We don't own fields today. The whole agricultural world is going through its own challenges, as you see right now, right? Like Russia invading Ukraine is going to create a massive, massive food shortage around the world. And my friends, it's only getting started right now, right? It's only going to get worse in time. It's not going to get better. For the next few years, it's going to be turbulent. But we have to remember that this parsha is really about something called faith. This parsha is there to teach you that we're never in control of the results. That yes, that even taking a year off, a sabbatical for the land, will ensure some level of financial gain even without the work. Because the world is broken. The world that we're in right now, it shouldn't operate this way. I shouldn't have to go to work. God did not want to create a world where I had to work. The world of work was an expression of the curse of Adam eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. If they did not eat from that tree, if they did not sin in ingesting evil into them, they would never lose the sight, the power to recognize that everything around them is from Borei Olam, from God. And work would not be the same. We would not have to work by the sweat of your brow. Itzvanech, that a woman will go through pain and labor. These are all not just labor in terms of giving birth, but in terms of her work itself. These things were punishments. That's not the world God wanted to create for us. He wanted to create a world where we can bask in his excellence, his awesomeness. And this happened, my friends. It happened at Mount Sinai. At Mount Sinai, God comes down and he says, here I am. No more uncertainty, no more doubts. He's here. That's what this Pasha is about. Pasha Behar, this idea of the Jubilee, of setting things free. These are not things that are written by man. These are things that come from a higher source. Because if men were writing this, it would be about taxes. It would be about giving back. What do you mean? How do you let a slave go free? It's mine. I bought it. You don't own anything. The Torah itself is a system that is fair. Why? Because it wants to give everyone the chance. Some people inherit a lot of money. They didn't do much to work for it. Some people have to work really hard, and they don't have much. But in order to create an even playing field, we have to give the people in society the feeling that there's a chance to move upward. Because if we don't do that, we don't give a path for growth, we end up disincentivizing them. This is, by the way, often happens in communist countries. And this is probably the reason why Russia is falling apart right now. Russia is falling apart simply because there's no real incentive to work hard. The government will pay for everything. Why should I work hard? There's no room for any kind of capitalistic philosophy there. I just do whatever's convenient and easy for me. So Putin's got bad advisors, bad generals who are going to do minimal work. But in America, in other capitalist countries, where you are incentivized by your work, the harder you work, Bezrat Hashem, God willing, you have more opportunity to be more and more successful. As long as you leave space for God to do his thing, infinite potential. I know guys who are nothing, plumbers who became multi-millionaires, right? There are guys who came from very wealthy families that lost everything, right? It's very much a expression of where we are. But ultimately, what the Parsha is asking us is to have belief, to have faith, that God will take care of every single one of our needs, that everything that we have, everything that we receive, no matter how hard we work or how little we work, ultimately we believe we will get what we need. I'm not saying you shouldn't work. Go and work. Do your shtadlut, 100%. But just be mindful that the monetary success you have is a bracha. So why is it Har Sinai over here? Why are we talking about Mount Sinai? It's very simple. Mount Sinai is there to humble us. We are not in control. I am not in control. But I have something called bitachon. I have trust. I trust that the Almighty will always provide for me as long as I do my hishtadlut. I trust that the Almighty will give me everything that I need and I'll have I'll have food in my belly, I'll have a place to sleep, as long as I'm playing my part. Now the question is, how are you willing to play your part? What are you willing to do to maintain this relationship of spiritual growth? What are you doing to work on becoming more humble in your life? What are you doing to bring these ideals, these mitzvot into your life? What are you doing to try to bring God into the world? That's what the Parsha wants. Parsha wants to create a world of somewhat equality, create the opportunity for everyone to become something, for everyone to recognize that they have the power of overcoming their situation and becoming more. May you be all blessed with that clarity. Wishing you all a Shabbat Shalom.